Hereby I open this academic ceremony at Maastricht University. First of all, I welcome Mrs. Inez Roosen. She will defend her thesis, Hello from the Other Side, Access to and Circulation of Health Information Between Migrants and Their Network Members at Origin. I welcome the three supervisors. Professor Rick Greuzen, he is Professor of Behavioral Change and Technology at Maastricht University. Professor Stef Kremers, he is Professor of Health Promotion, also at Maastricht University. And Dr. Jennifer Sellen, she is Associate Professor of International and European Law at the Faculty of Law, also at Maastricht University. I will introduce the 5 opponents later during the ceremony. Welcome to you all here in the aula, and I welcome also all followers of the live stream. Mrs. Roosen, may I ask you to give a summary of your thesis? Please go ahead.
Thank you. Dear Prorector, Defense Committee. Yes, of course. This, I think, might be better. Okay. Dear Prorector, Defense Committee, family, friends, and colleagues, thank you for joining the session today, where I can finally talk a full hour about my topic, my research about the last years, my PhD. I can present my PhD, Hello from the Other Side. Let me first start with an example story. An example story of 2 of my close friends that I've observed during the corona pandemic. Mbarek, who is a close friend of mine, he's from Morocco. And he married Anneke, who's also a close friend of mine. And Anneke is Belgian, so he migrated 12 years ago for love to marry Anneke. Now, during this time, when he was staying in Belgium, he remained in close contact with his friends and family in Morocco via phone calls, text messages, social media, and so on. But also via return visits to visit his friends and family. They also visited Morocco in the summer of 2021. Now, upon their return, they found out that all of them catch corona. So all of them were infected. Now, and this is the interesting part, at least for my research. Mbarek, he needed to make arrangements in Belgium. I mean, he needed to make arrangements for his work, he needed to make arrangements for his children, school arrangements, and so on. But at the same time, he also made arrangements in Morocco. He informed his friends and family. He informed them about the symptoms of COVID. He explained what the symptoms are, and also he advised them if they showed any of these symptoms, that they should stay inside for 10 days, and that they should get tested. This advice was based on the Belgian guidelines at the time. Now, that's interesting that he actually provided the Belgian information. So he was sharing with his friends and family members the information about COVID. Some of them adhered to this information, so if they actually felt that they had any symptoms, they would actually stay inside for 10 days. Some of them also wanted to get tested, but they couldn't because the lines were too long. And I would like to translate this one story of one migrant, one moment in time, and just focusing on one health outcome. I would like to imagine that if you can translate this, just one case that I was demonstrating, if you can translate this to the 1 billion migrants that are there worldwide, of course, if you include the immigrants, those who migrate internationally, and the internal migrants, those who move internally within country borders. All of them, they move for a variety of reasons. And they stay in contact in different ways, shapes, and forms with their family. All of them can transfer also diverse information and different components of information, and also, again, a variety of health outcomes. And this information sharing, this is something that I would like to refer to as transnational social exchanges. This is why my research aim is understanding the link between transnational social exchanges and the health of network members at origin. Now, what do we know? What do we know of current literature? Current literature demonstrates that these information exchanges, these transnational social exchanges, happen on an individual and on a collective level. Individually, between a migrant and their network members at origin, and collectively via diaspora organizations and organizations at origin. They can lead to positive health outcomes and negative health outcomes. And what I found to be a very important component to understand these transnational social exchanges are the context of both origin and destination. I've also seen that there's friction sometimes between migrants and the network members at origin, what can lead to avoidance behaviors from the network members at origin. Avoidance behaviors, not picking up the phone, or actually avoiding to talk to the migrant, or disregarding the information they want to share. I've also seen that the current research focuses on south to north migration. Now, what do I mean by this? Current literature focuses on migration from, for example, Mexico to the US. And that's a pity, because that only describes a very small part of the current migration that's going on. As I just mentioned, you have a lot of internal migration, but you also have other migration movements within regions, for example, within the European Union. I've also seen that there's a need for clarity, conceptually wise. So current literature studying this topic, they use the concept that's currently used, they use it incoherently, inconsistently, and they also use it incorrectly. And that's why I'm proposing the transnational social exchanges as a concept. I've also seen that current research misses a conceptual model to guide research on the topic. And that's why I propose to you the Comprehensive Transnational Exchange of Health Information model, also known as the CHAT model. It's quite intense, maybe, especially for the layman, so I'm trying just to give a short explanation. The CHAT model covers both destination side, so the side of the migrants, and origin side, the side of the network members at origin, and the connection between the two. Now, I analyzed the demographic and health surveys, and there I studied different components of the CHAT model. I analyzed Afghanistan, where I studied birth control awareness and use, and I studied Pakistan, where I studied birth control awareness, intention to use, and use, and HIV/AIDS awareness and social rejection as part of stigma. The most important results that I want to share with you today are focusing on gender, destination, location, and the information processing of the network members at origin when they receive the transnational social exchanges. Well, looking at gender, I will base my explanation on the Pakistan case studies, so on the birth control awareness and HIV/AIDS awareness. For example, there was one outcome where I observed that having a male migrant household member would lead to a decreased awareness of male condoms and male sterilization. And there you can see that migrants would share gender preferred information. I also have seen, when looking at HIV awareness, that if there is a mismatch between the genders, that this would lead to a decreased awareness of HIV/AIDS. So what does it mean? For example, if you have a female migrant household member and a male network member at origin, this would lead to a decreased awareness of HIV/AIDS and vice versa. Looking at destination location, I've seen that destination location is crucial, not only for immigrants, but also for internal migrants. But I will explain this result by focusing on the immigrants, and I will base these results on the Afghan case studies, where I split the outcomes on the migrants moving to Pakistan and the migrants moving to Iran. What have I seen? That if you had a migrant household member that would move to Pakistan, that this would result in a decreased awareness of birth control, but also a decreased use of birth control methods. And this could be explained by limited availability, accessibility, and a limited quality of healthcare in Pakistan, and especially the area where the Afghan migrants would move to, the Pashtun Belt, and also a general rejection or a more conservative social norms and less health education prevention programs based on strict norms. There were more strict norms, so there were less sexual and reproductive health education programs. So these results could explain the final outcomes if you had a migrant moving to Pakistan. Now, if you had a migrant that would move to Iran, I observed that this would lead to increased birth control awareness, but of specific birth control methods. And this could be explained by a quite progressive health education program in Iran at the time of the survey, not anymore, they abolished it. So what have they done in Iran at the time? They have actually made birth control available, freely available. They have actually, to create the messages, the birth control program messages, they have worked together with religious leaders, and they have taken verses of the Quran to promote birth control use. The information processing, I will base these results on the Pakistan case study as well. And here I will explain some of the components of the innovation decision process. So if you look at birth control awareness, here you can see that knowledge could be best explained by the destination location of migrants, and most specifically by the immigrant destination locations. If you look at the intention to use birth control, so the decision whether or not to use a birth control method, the women, the female participants, there you could see that the personal characteristics were the most important. And the most important characteristics were education and whether or not they had a job at the moment of the survey. And birth control use, so the implementation of the received information. Here we could see that the destination location of immigrants specifically would contribute most to the explanation of birth control use, and specifically when the network members at origin would receive economic remittances, meaning that economic remittances and transnational social exchanges are entwined. Now, the concluding remarks. Can these transnational exchanges influence the health of network members at origin? Yes, yes they can, just not always as expected. Why? Because the transnational social exchanges process is complex and it therefore needs the necessary nuances to understand this complexity. It also needs coherent conceptual approaches to study these these necessary nuances, but we also need a critical reflection of the perspectives, conceptualizations, representation, and cooperation used in current research. That's why I'm proposing the concept of transnational social exchanges and the comprehensive transnational exchange of health information, or the chat model, to guide future research on the topic. Thank you very much for your attention. I will give the word back to the prorector.
Thank you for your presentation. We will now move to the opposition. The opposition will be opened by the chair of the Thesis Assessment Committee, Professor Nanne de Vries. He is Professor of Health Promotion and Education at Maastricht University. Professor de Vries.
Thank you, Mr. Pro-Rector. Well, let me start by congratulating you, of course. You know that I admire your work. I'd also like to congratulate the team that supervised you. And actually, when reading your vita, I thought you're a migrant yourself.
Yes, I am.
You are, and not only because you're Belgian and you moved to the Netherlands and then went back, but also because you started out by doing a bachelor in health promotion, and then went to become a green belt in Lean Six Sigma work. So that's constant innovation, continuous innovation.
Exactly.
But then you came back, and then you were at my department. Then you, at least in the master's program, and then you went to UNIMERIT, and then you came back home again.
Exactly.
So now we are here, and you're doing your PhD in health promotion, which is commendable, of course. I also want to congratulate you with the fact that you've been a very active PhD representative as well. We always value that citizenship in person, so thank you very much for that. And then some personal challenges, of course, that I know about. So I really congratulate you on where you are today. But now,
Yes.
you were boasting a little bit about the chat model, so let's turn to the chat model.
Yes.
Actually, you call it a comprehensive transnational exchange of health information model, but actually it's far more, because you also include the Rogers model of diffusion of innovations, and it starts by confirmation of using a new method to become healthy or to remain healthy, which is a behavior or a practice. It's not information. So that's my first remark. Could you react to that? Is it not a misnomer to call it an information model?
To call the chat model an information model instead of a behavioral change model? Highly esteemed opponent. Many thanks for your kind comments and your question. I would not necessarily call it an information model.
You do. You call it a health information model.
Well, no, I would not limit it to this perspective.
Okay.
That's not the intention I had.
Okay. Okay, let's leave it to that. Because
yes, exactly. Yes, the child just needs a name in the end.
Now, another thing that struck me, and this relates to a thing that you're remarking at page 253, you say that one of the highlights from chapters 4, 5, and 6 is that sending or receiving economic remittances support the transfer of TSE. So the information exchange is also served by economic remittances.
Yes.
I don't see economic remittances in this model at all.
No, that's, oh yeah, highly esteemed opponent. Thank you.
No, you only have to say that once.
Oh, only once. Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you. Yes, I did not include this in this model because I wanted to focus purely on the information and well, all the information that is exchanged, so purely the communication, as you're also describing, so not only the exchanges of money. So I actually wanted just to study the influence of the communication and the information exchange. I wanted to split at this moment.
If I read that page 253, you say that this is sort of a, well, an intervening factor or something. So if there's no economic remittance, then maybe the information exchange also does not take place, or the other way around. I don't know what you imply there, but to imply that economic remittance is a factor within this whole issue.
You could consider it within the existence of a transnational network. So you could consider it within, first of all, the establishment, the existence, the strength of a transnational network, and also the value of a transnational network. But I also argue in the discussion, well, first of all, this is the first proposal to actually conceptualize these transnational social exchanges. And of course, this, as I also described, this is the first proposition. And I would like to develop this further, also maybe by conceptualizing these transnational networks a bit further. And there, these economic remittances could be.
Let's do that. Let's do that.
Let's do that.
And my first thoughts then would be, I'm trained as a social psychologist, and one of the models that we use is by two authors called French and Raven, which is about power bases. Now, power is not the same as influence, of course, but it is the base for being influential. And the basis, one of the bases, is reward power. So if I reward power.
Yeah.
So if I reward you in one way or the other, I influence you. And this is actually what economic remittance might do.
Yeah.
But it goes further, because one of the other power bases is legitimate power. I am entitled to influence you. And actually I am, because I'm your boss. But this might also be because I give you money. I send money back to homeland, and thereby I'm entitled to influence the people back home.
Yes.
How would you feel about incorporating the power bases in this whole model? And there's also coercive power, which is withdrawal of economic remittance.
No, absolutely. And that's also one of the results that I mentioned that I've observed in current literature, the avoidance behavior, which is linked to, friction between network members and migrants. And most of these frictions are based on power imbalances. So, for example, sometimes you see that a migrant would send economic remittances and give specific, would provide specific information how to spend these economic remittances, and then would follow up and would quite harshly follow up phone calls, and they want to see proof and these kind of things. So there you would see these power imbalances, what then could create the avoidance behavior. So I would say, I would agree, it has a place as well. So there's still room for further development.
Yeah, another minute. Thank you, Mr. Prorector. In your definition, you say something about the circular process of information exchange between, you call it origin and destination. Huh? You have chosen not to incorporate the circular process in your chat model, because that's really unidirectional. And I'd like you to explain to me why you did this.
At the time when creating the model, it was a conscious decision first to focus on a linear direction. I do agree that this is also something that I might consider and probably will still include in future developments of the model. However, I also discussed in the discussion section that if you, for example, look at the components of the Rogers model, so for example, if you would look at prior conditions, that you can also can catch these reversed remittances, as they are called in the literature as well. And also, for example, if you can define the social structures as a transnational social structure instead of just the social structure where the migrant is living in, then you can also capture actually these reverse remittances that are coming from both sides, so also from the network members at origin.
I don't really get it yet, but maybe we'll talk about that later, because that would be a bit... I see the pro-rector looking at me, so I'll have to stop you. Thank you very much for your answers, and I'll give the floor back.
Thank you, Professor de Vries. The opposition will be continued by Professor Gera Nagelhout. She is Professor of Health and Well-being of People with a Low Social Economic Position at Maastricht University. Professor Nagelhout.
Thank you. Dear candidate, I would like to start with congratulating you and also your supervisors with performing important studies and writing a really good thesis about this. I enjoyed reading your thesis, and in particular, I liked reading the critical reflections that you wrote in your general discussion. I think it is great if a researcher is open about choices that have been made at the beginning of the PhD project that you would now maybe make differently. Mm-hmm. And I liked how you described that, for example, your use of certain terms has changed throughout your PhD project because of realizations about the need to use neutral terms that do not contain negative connotations about the people that you are studying. Mm-hmm. But besides these compliments, I also have some questions, of course. In those critical reflections, part of your general discussion on page 212, you mention the concept of positive health. And you mentioned that it can be a valuable tool for researchers, health practitioners, and policymakers. Can you start with shortly describing what positive health is and why you think it can be a valuable tool within your area of research? And I have follow-up questions, so please be short.
Yes. Highly esteemed opponent, many thanks for your kind comments and your question. Well, positive health is, how I understand positive health is that it actually has a broader definition than the current WHO definition. So it would include religiosity and spirituality. And it also includes it's more patient-oriented. So it includes the decision and interaction with the patient to provide holistic care.
Okay, thank you. Very short.
Very short, yeah, I know.
Very good. To be honest, I was a bit surprised that you recommended positive health to be used in studies about migrant health, because this concept is a Dutch concept and is developed with input from Dutch patients and Dutch health professionals. And I also read in your critical reflections that we should not only do research from this dominant Anglo-Western perspective. Mm-hmm. So if you would follow your own recommendation and not do research from this dominant Anglo-Western perspective, would you indeed use the Dutch concept of positive health then?
That very valid question, because to be honest, I have searched as well for literature beyond the Anglo-Saxon scope. So I also have searched in libraries outside the university library. I also have searched the concepts that I've studied. I've also searched for different terms in different languages to try to find maybe additional information. However, I could not find new terms. I mean, and that's also a limitation probably of myself, that I don't speak any additional languages maybe. However, the positive health concept, I proposed a positive health concept, and I acknowledge that it has its limitations. Yes, it's based on an Anglo-Saxon perspective, but when studying the transnational social exchanges, and especially from the migrant side, I could see that the current health definition was incorrect and still missing components that the positive health was actually providing. So this is a proposition again.
Yeah, okay, it makes more sense now. But if you wouldn't have any limitations during your PhD thesis in time or money, would that then be the way to go if you would need to conceptualize a health concept, to look into the literature, not finding it, and then just thinking, oh, let's just use this Dutch concept?
Not at all. If I would have money, if I would have time, I would create a group of migrants and I would actually ask them, how would you define health? What is a proper concept of health? And also of all the other concepts that I actually proposed in my chat model. So yes, if I had time and money, there's so much more that I want to do, yes.
Sounds good, okay. Is there time for another question? You end your critical reflections with the lesson that representation and cooperation matters, and I agree with that. However, you mainly talk about representation of academics from different parts of the world and different disciplines. And when it comes to the people that you are studying, you recommend that we should not only use secondary data, but collect primary data from their perspective. However, if we want true representation and cooperation, should we then not go a step further than including academics and collecting primary data?
Absolutely correct. Again, and that's also the goal I have with my follow-up research. So I'm aiming to study, for example, the chat model in my postdoc research, where I actually want to study components of the postdoc model with migrants in Belgium coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo and matching them with their network members at origin in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And what I would like to do is I would like to use a participatory research approach where I actually want to include network members at origin, where I want to include Congolese migrants in Belgium, and also from different layers within the society, to actually being able to collect the data as good as possible throughout the whole process. So, for example, I also have discussed my proposal with a Congolese migrant from Belgium. So, developing my proposal, but I also want throughout the study, I want to include the migrants and the network members at origin.
Very happy to hear
yes.
that you're going a step further than what I read initially in your thesis. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor Nagelhout, and thank you for being the secretary of this committee. The next opponent is Dr. Carlijn Haagsman. She is Associate Professor of Globalization and Development at the Faculty of Art and Social Sciences of Maastricht University. Dr. Haagsman.
Dear candidate, dear Inez, first of all, I want to congratulate you like everyone else did. It's a very highly topical, as is also was shown through your presentation, topic. And it's also really under-researched, so I really appreciate this dissertation. Also because it brings different literatures together, so from health sciences, but also from the social sciences and so on. And I appreciate that you bring this together and introduce the different literatures to each other. And also you have very unique data. But as tradition prescribes, we're not here today to only give you praise, so I will go to my questions. My question concerns the concept that you developed yourself in your dissertation, which is called transnational social exchanges, and how it relates to the concept of social remittances as coined by Peggy Levitt in 1998, and then further developed by her and Deepak Lamdaneves in 2011. Mm-hmm. In the introduction, you state that you want to move away from the term social remittances. As you say, it's linked to economic remittances, and you feel that transnational social exchange is a more neutral term than social remittances. And I want to understand a bit better why you chose this concept over the term that most people actually use in the field of migration and beyond. As it is written in the article Social Remittances Revisited, it's actually precisely because of the economic is always privileged in early migration research, that the term social remittances was actually coined to build on that and to actually say, hey, wait a minute, we have to also look at the social and the cultural and political exchanges, not only the economic. So they really state themselves that economics is not the whole story, and it's because they want to bring culture back to migration debates. That's what it says. So yeah, they really want to speak to this literature and show that there's more than economic. Moreover, you state that you want to use the more neutral term transnational social exchanges, also to clarify that it's a continuous process from both sides, and that these exchanges are sometimes also unconscious and part of the everyday. But various authors, also including Peggy Levitt and Lamna Neves, have shown indeed that it's not a unidirectional flow, and it also has unintended consequences. And finally, in chapter 3, you state that association with economic remittances is also that it is seen as positive, so economic remittances, while social remittances are not always. However, there's a lot of research on economic remittances, and actually was already alluded to, that shows that it's much more complex for economic remittances. It's sometimes negative, sometimes it's people don't want to send it, or they're pressured to send it, etc. So it comes also with a lot of burden. So, having said all that, I want you to invite you to elaborate a bit further on how you developed the concept of transnational social exchange and how that compares to social remittances. So in short, what are the differences, and could you explain further why you chose to develop this new term instead of keeping to the already developed term?
Mm-hmm. Esteemed opponent, many thanks for your kind comments and your question. I've decided, well, this term actually evolved from the narrative literature review that I've done with my colleagues in Sheffield. And when actually studying transnational social exchanges and the influences on migrants and the network members at origin, we actually noticed that because they had a health sciences background solely, and I had the combination of both a migration and a health sciences background. And there I felt there was sometimes in the beginning, especially, a miscommunication of what social remittances were. And when discussing these, well, miscomprehensions, we noticed that it was, you could base this due to the, due to the fact that economic remittances, even though Peggy Levitt wanted to move away from economic remittances and want to focus on also the social exchanges, she still used in the initial definition components of economic remittances. It has been defined based on the concept of economic remittances, and that you can also see clearly in the redefinition that she needed to readjust together with Lamba Nieves some components, because I had, I mean, also the positive and the negative, and that it actually goes both ways in these things. We had the feeling when we were discussing this that this is based, due to the fact that it was based on economic remittances, or at the perspective of economic remittances, first of all. And when discussing the difference between social remittances and economic remittances, especially within the health sciences field, it's also often, if you have the first discussion with family, friends, and so on, well, the first connotation that that people have with money is not that bad. So I'm not saying on the long term that when you have established negative connotations with the exchange of money, oftentimes I have the feeling this is the combination of the the power imbalances, so the social remittances combined with economic remittances, so the follow-up of sending the money, and how do you implement it, how do you do this, and how do you do that. So I do think you can disentangle the social remittances and economic remittances, and I want to disentangle the two by clearly just presenting a new concept, transnational social exchanges, because of this, and because of the association, but also because of the action. For example, money is, well, quite obvious. If you transfer money, you can have it quite fast on the bank, you can see it, okay, I received the money, or you sent the money. But exchanging health-related information or exchanging information, it's sometimes not that obvious. It's also because the migrant can be a role model, that people sometimes can copy behaviors of the migrant. You cannot copy money of the migrant.
So is it really the term, is it the definitions, the wording that is different, or is there something also different in how you operationalize it and do it? Because social remittances have also been shown by a lot of researchers and also by Becky Levitt to move away from this economic model you describe and actually use remittances, the word, to show that it's actually connected. So you have the economic, the political, culture, etc. So is it, just very short because I have a follow-up question, but is it the word different, or is it that there is also a definitional difference?
No, the idea is that it's a refinement and an extension of the redefinition of 2011.
You have somewhat more time.
Yes, because I have a follow-up question. It's a bigger one. Actually, I want to continue talking about this term that you developed, but by asking you something that is based on my own research to see whether that also fits in within your definition. So my second question concerns chapter 2, and that's a systematic literature review on transnational social networks and health, in which you used 33 keywords to track literature on the topic. For example, you used the word social remittances, transfer, or exchange, and in the end, that led you to 36 papers that you included in your analysis. As you may know, my particular field of study is that of transnational families and health and well-being, and that is families who live across borders who are separated because of migration and therefore live in different nation states. So this could be parents who are separated from their underage children who remain in the country of origin while these parents migrate. It could be elderly who remain in the country of origin while their children migrate. It can take many forms. Well, this literature on transnational families also looks at these transnational exchanges, and they have also studied health, impacts on health, well-being, psychological well-being, and the effects of this separation. So it has, for example, been found that children in transnational families have sometimes lower health or well-being compared to those whose parents live with them in the origin country. So I understand this literature was not part of your analysis because that was beyond, and if you use the keywords you use, you also not find them because they didn't talk about social remittances or exchange. So I totally understand that. But I do want to reflect with you a bit more what maybe your research could mean to this literature. Because what this literature shows is that if something happens with one member of the family, it can affect another. For example, when a child is sick in the country of origin, a parent who lives maybe in the Netherlands can be affected in their psychological health. We have shown that because they really worry and can so experience health issues themselves. Also, research from Valentina Mazzucato describes someone who was imprisoned in the Netherlands, a Ghanaian, and that really affected the health of their family members who are in Ghana. So basically, having a family member can have health effects. And while this is not like intentional exchange of knowledge that, on health, it is a knowledge exchange that has health effects. So, as you said in your term of transnational social exchange, it can have unintended effects and it's not always conscious. So I was wondering if you could see the link to this type of research, and if you would also call this a transnational social exchange, even if it's not really about sharing explicit knowledge about health, but it's about knowledge that has health effects. So I want you to reflect a bit on that.
You may give a short answer.
Yes. I do see that there are possibilities, especially when you look at the social networks, because you also have social connections and identities and these things, concepts that Peggy Levitt used, of course, that are still transferred as well. If you talk about your research, that are still also part of my research. So I do see overlap, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Haaksman. The next opponent is not here in the aula, but she is present online. It is Dr. Simone Vezzoli. She is, as a researcher, affiliated with the Institute of History at Leiden University. Dr. Vezzoli.
Thank you very much. Dear candidate, dear Inez, I congratulate you for and your supervisors for the completion of this dissertation, which is very stimulating and also very relevant. The topic is quite important to study. I have a couple of questions. My first question concerns the way in which you have proposed studying the processes through this chat model. So in various parts of your dissertation, you point to the fact that one of the big knowledge gaps in studying migration and the transfer of health knowledge is in understanding the processes that underlie these transnational social exchanges. So you propose this chat model as a framework to examine specific elements that contribute to these processes. In tables 2 to 5 in chapter 3, you present a set of very valuable and stimulating questions that set the stage for in-depth research. The survey data upon which you relied for your empirical analysis does not fully make use of the richness of the chat model, in fact. Could you elaborate on whether qualitative methods could have given more or other insights? And if so, which qualitative methods could have made a valuable contribution to study these processes? And what discouraged you from using these methods in this particular research?
Esteemed opponent, many thanks for your kind comments and your question. I completely understand the question as well, and the decision why I've chosen quantitative data, the DHS data. Of course, I also, you always have time limitations and monetary limitations. However, I do believe that even though they do not cover all the components of the chat model, and they do not cover all the specific components of the chat model, I do believe that it provides valuable perspectives. So about what the chat model can explain. So of course, this is scratching the surface. And if I had a big bag of money, then, as I already mentioned, then I want to conduct further research, studying both sides, so the migrant side and the network members at origin side. And so I want to combine quantitative and qualitative data. And I really want to include both participatory research, including actually the perspectives of migrants and network members at origin, but I also want to include ethnographic research, so observing the exchanges of information and so on. So I actually, if I can choose, then I would combine the quantitative side with the qualitative side using the participatory research and ethnographic research.
Okay, thank you. Do I have time for another question? Yeah. Okay, so in chapter 3, on page 85, you indicate that the research has primarily focused on people at origin that are in sending developing countries. In other words, in the global south. You also indicated that current research misses, open quote, relevant perceptions and knowledge from the so-called global south, close quotes. In your research, you also focus on Afghanistan and Pakistan, but your data enabled you to consider migrants who resided in Western countries, as well as in neighboring countries, and other destinations such as Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. What has the inclusion of destinations generally considered to be in the global south added to the existing knowledge? How does this new knowledge relate to your expectations when you first identified the fact that southern perspectives are missing?
As I also discussed in my discussion section, I first had a very optimistic perspective about these transnational social exchanges. So I thought that, as many of my students, migrants coming from the south to the north can be wonderful creatures, just absorbing the information and just transferring the information to their network members at origin. Of course, it's not as simple as that. There are many factors that need to be included. These factors I have included in my current research. So not only that, the current research focuses on migration from, for example, Middle and Southern American countries to the US. And I moved away from this perspective by focusing on Asian countries. Also, current studies mostly focused on only emigration and the influences of emigration on these transnational exchanges. And my study also includes the transnational social exchanges that can occur from migrants that move internally. So in that sense, I do think my perspectives have, for example, changed, that I first would think that migrants can transfer information, like migrants that move internationally can exchange information. And then when I looked internally, I also saw many opportunities, but also many failures that well, hinders or supports this transnational social exchanges process.
Okay, thank you.
For a very small question, if you like.
Okay. Your empirical chapters were based on national level survey data, and in two countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, and two topics, birth control methods and HIV AIDS awareness and opinions of individuals with HIV and AIDS. What was your selection criteria for these two countries, outside of the fact that, okay, they were not the classic Central American to North America migration? Why did you decide to explore just one of these topics in Afghanistan and two in Pakistan? So in a way, I'm asking you, how was the selection process for these countries? How would you justify that?
Of course, Afghanistan is known as a country where migration already occurred for many, many years. It has the second largest protracted refugee population in the world at the time when I was analyzing the data. And so thinking, I considered both the migration side, so how many migrants there were within a country. I was also considering health-wise, how is the health at destination, so in Afghanistan. And then if you look at the DHS data, then Afghanistan was one of the first data sets of DHS that included also migration information to analyze actually the associations of having a migrant household member on, for example, birth control use and birth control awareness. So, well, that was the first decision. So looking at the data that was available, and that was actually new, but also looking at what was interesting from a migration perspective and from a health perspective, because both of them were, well, had high migration and concerning health outcomes, specifically for females.
Thank you, Dr. Vetzoli. The next opponent is Professor Rob Ruiter. He is Professor of Health and Social Psychology at Maastricht University. Professor Ruiter.
Thank you, Mr. Prorector. Dear candidate, it's only until very recently that I became familiar with your work. And I must say it's really highly interesting work. And also listening to you today, it even raises more my interest in the kind of thing you do. I also saw this beautiful book this morning, and I was immediately, I saw the manuscript earlier, but immediately the title, "Hello from the Other Side," made me immediately think of a song by Adele. So yes. I played it this morning, yes. And listening to the first minute of the song nicely summarizes your work somehow.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Yes.
And then this phrase comes, "Hello from the other side," and especially if you're traveling in your car, you put it loud and sing along. Well, I cannot sing, so I'll not sing. But I was reading, and the first quick question, small answer. How did you end up with the fusion of innovation theory? How did you connect this to your work? Why do you think this is a relevant theory to your work? Yeah. I didn't fully get it.
Sorry, you did
I
not?
did not fully get it, why the diffusion of innovation theory is.
Yeah. Well, first of all, highly esteemed opponent. Many thanks for your kind comments and your question. Actually, the diffusion of innovation theory naturally came to the chat model, because when I presented the first edition of the chat model, when I was visiting the university in Sheffield, many of the attendants there, they mentioned that you only focus on the migrant side. What about the network members at origin? And then we were discussing that the social contexts matter, and how transferring, for example, different information, innovative information, and there you go, the fusion of innovations.
So the innovation is the transfer of is the information. That's the innovation that we talk about,
it
and not, for example, birth control use or.
It can be innovative. So that's the idea that it sometimes can be innovative, or different at least.
Okay. Now back to your work. I was wondering, so what's the final objective of this work? So, and the first question that came to mind is okay, what kind of, you talk about if you give me the money, well, I give you lots of money now, millions.
Yes.
And you say, oh, I want to do further research. And, but what should be the final objective of all that research? That's the first question I have. And a second bit related to that, this is very descriptive research. You have existing data, you do secondary data analysis, it's cross-sectional. You talk about, also in your presentation, about direction. It leads to. I wonder if that's always the case, but that's, of course, you can argue that you don't have the causal evidence. But my interest is really in behavior change, and behavior change to solve a problem, or in this case, behavior change to promote health. So, and then from this research, what kind of leads do you get in terms of what could be possible targets for intervention? You highlight gender, you highlight destination country as very important factors here, but both cannot be changed. They are very stable, it's there. So if you want to intervene or somehow make this work relevant for future initiatives to promote health, what kind of research would you like to do, and what could be possible targets for intervention?
Just for clarification reasons, you mean how to implement changes exactly?
Well, my perspective in my research is always I do research to, in the end, have ideas of what could be possible interventions we can do to promote people's health?
Well, okay. Well, I have one very interesting example. For example, the Mexican government has observed that Mexicans abroad in the US, that they had limited access to health and that they had lower health outcomes and so on. And they have created, it's called the Ventanillas de Salud, and it's offered in all the embassies and consulates throughout the US, where if a Mexican migrant is sitting at the embassy or the consulate, they are automatically provided with information about health, about blood pressure, sugar intake. They even have free psychologists. You can check for diabetes. All these things are freely accessible and available to the migrants at the embassies in the US, the Mexican embassies. And there you could, for example, start with an intervention. And
as you will have noticed, Mrs. Roosen, the time for appointed for defending your thesis has passed.
Yes.
The committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and in particular the quality of your defense, and please await our return with the result.
oh my God. I know.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes. In the meantime, let's take a closer look at Maastricht University's renowned teaching method, problem-based learning. Once the pro-rector reconvenes the session, we'll tune in and continue the live stream.
Problem-based learning, or PBL. What does that mean exactly? 3 of my fellow students and I will show you around.
Every week, we analyze a different case or issue together. We discuss the case and everyone can contribute different perspectives to the group discussion. If we get stuck, our tutor helps us out and suggests what we could do next. I prefer going to the library to prepare. Here, I can focus and I have quick access to books or journals that help me understand the case. Today, I can also train my stitching skills in the Skills Lab, where you can immediately put into practice what you've learned. After a day like this, I like going to the gym to clear my head and get ready for the next day.
At UM, you meet people from all around the world. Hello guys. Some of them are doing their exchange semester here, and they often say that PBL helps them learn and retain things very easily. I can understand why. It's a very active way of learning because you have to bring your own perspective to real-life cases. You have a lot of freedom to manage your time, your studies, your hobbies, and your work. Of course, that also means a lot of responsibility. Right now, for example, I'm arranging my exchange semester in Madrid. How cool is that? In this group session, we're the managers who have to allocate the resources of a real company. This is how we put into practice what we learned this morning. Studying here means being proactive and learning to plan well. Prioritizing and performing well under stress are great skills that help you develop as a person. But now it's time to grab a coffee at the Student Service Center.
Right now, we're at the Brightlands Camelot campus. Here we can apply knowledge from lectures and tutorials in a practical setting. This helps us understand what we have learned and further develop our lab skills. Today, we're determining the amounts of cholesterol in various products. What I really like is the project periods at the end of each semester, where we complete a full research project. That includes planning, collecting data, analyzing, and presenting the findings. That way we learn how research works and we're able to see what it's like to be a real scientist. After practicals, I have to write a lab report that also helps me process everything I have learned today. has a lot of learning spaces where you can work on your own or with other students. This evening, I'm meeting my friends for a movie night organized by the MSP Study Association.
If you study law, you have to read quite a lot. Not all information is relevant, so you learn how to easily find the information you need to solve your case. In the afternoon, I have to give a presentation, so I like to practice it with a fellow student. Later today, a lawyer is giving a lecture. This will help us better understand the case we're working on. Speaking in front of a group is quite exciting the first time round, but you get too used to it quickly. And having to present helps you also to adopt knowledge better. What I like the most is that we sometimes get to enter a plea in front of a real judge. These moot courts are really exciting. Now it's time for drinks with friends. Studying is important, but so is relaxing once in a while.
Nou, ik hoop dat ze toch bij hebben.
Oh ja, ze komen. Moet ik dan dat boek verstappen?
Nee, goed. Laat me maar.
Mrs. Roosen, the degree committee has assessed the quality of your thesis and in particular the quality of your defense. And in view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Krutz is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch University custom and law. Professor Krutz.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
In that case, by the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Inez Roosen, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. Now, dear Dr. Roosen, finally I can say this. Feels good, right? Yeah. Jennifer, Steph, and I are really proud of you, and I feel honored that I can devote these first words to you. You got your PhD now. I think it's an enormous milestone. And in your case, I think it's not only a milestone, but also a stepping stone. I think you referred already to that a couple of times during your defense. And you've worked for many years on this, but I cannot imagine that after today you're done with this topic of migration and health. I think it's an unrisky prediction to say that one way or the other, this topic will stay on your radar for the long run. It's really close to your heart, and that was clear actually from day one when you walked into my office with the idea of writing your thesis on this. I'm glad that we could make this work and that you're standing here now. That you're standing here means, according to the regulations for obtaining a doctoral degree, that your thesis provides evidence of competence to practice independent scholarship. Now, no doubt about that. However, in the final chapter of your thesis, you also added some critical reflections throughout this journey. And I thought it would be a good idea to use these reflections as a point of departure to actually critically reflect on you. So here we go, sit back and relax, or stand back and relax. First, conceptualizations matter. It was already referred to before, and although colloquial use of the term differs, we should not forget that you are a migrant yourself. You came all the way from Neer-Oeteren, and you came to this exotic city of Maastricht. And now, following your shed medal, the question is, of course, who is the receiving unit in this regard? If I speak on a personal level, I think that the chat model already needs to be revised, because I felt very much like the receiving unit. That doesn't fit within the model, I admit, but I really learned a lot from you about this topic, so that's a good thing. Meanwhile, you've moved back to Neer-Oeteren. The logical follow-up question then is, of course, whether people in the country of origin will learn more from you as the people in the country of destination. And I think that's a valuable question for future research. Your second reflection was perspectives matter. It would now be easy for me to say that already at the start of your PhD trajectory, you had a master's degree in migration studies and in health education and promotion. And this is reflected in your thoughts on the topic, and this helps you to see the complexity of the behaviors and all the many factors related to this. However, I think we have to go back some steps earlier, way before the your formal education, because you already debunked this in your own propositions. Because the realization that alles hängt miteinander zusammen is apparently part and parcel of being raised in the Rose family. You're also very active in education, so I hope you spread this family wisdom to our students at our university as well. And then finally, the third reflection, representations matter. I think you took this one a bit too literal. You've been a PhD representative within our school, Capri, at our faculty, FHML, at our university, and if that wasn't enough, at the national level. So I think you made sure that the voices of PhD candidates were heard everywhere. And when I recently asked you whether you could stand in last minute at a Capri strategy meeting, you immediately said yes. And you even enjoyed this, to think along at this strategic level. So, in short, you walk the talk and you learn from your own reflections. Congratulations on all you have achieved. And I want to use this occasion to also extend my congratulations to your family here present or online, and some new upcoming family members, I heard. And I hope the rest of the day will be without a lot of reflections and mostly based on, focused on celebrations. There's a beautiful day ahead of us, and I think it's now the time to celebrate. Well done.
Thank you.
Esteemed Dr. Roosen, dear Inez, yes. It's my great pleasure to congratulate you with your doctorate and honor that you have required today. And I do that also on behalf of the Board of Deans of Maastricht University. And let me share some thoughts of the committee with you. We have read your thesis with great interest, and we appreciate your studies very much. And we see that it's difficult indeed to draw firm conclusions, but we consider this thesis as a good fundament of the studies that you have done. We liked the discussion with you, the clearness, not always, but in most of the answers, and you have shown to be very knowledgeable about the field that you have studied. And we were very interested in having the discussion with you. I would like to congratulate, therefore, also your three supervisors, Professor Krutze, Professor Kremers, and Dr. Sellen. Congratulations with the results that we have seen today in the quality of the thesis and the quality of the defense. You may be proud of her. And I also include, of course, in my congratulations, your family, your parents, your brothers and sisters, and all the other members of, I learned, your large family. And also, of course, I include your colleagues and all those who have contributed to the results of your studies and your thesis. Therefore, I think that you will have a successful professional career, and I hope that you also have a happy personal life. I also like to thank all the members of both committees, as well the Thesis Assessment Committee as well as this degree committee. Thank you all for your preparations, for your interesting questions, and the judgment that you have made. Maastricht University appreciates your contributions to this PhD ceremony. Before I end this academic ceremony, I would like to indicate what we are going to do after this. We will take, after the closure of the ceremony, we will take a picture here with you in the middle. And also in the second session, also your parents and members of your family. I don't know whether everyone will come forward, but so we will make both a picture here, and also Dr. Fetzoli I will ask her in a minute to congratulate you, because she will still be and stay in Leiden and not here. Thereafter, we will take a picture in the hall, a second picture in the stairs of the hall, and then I would like you, as the people in the aula, to go to the refter, where we'll have the reception later, and we will follow a little bit later to you in the rafter. And this is all. Here I close this academic ceremony at Maastricht University. I would like to invite now Dr. Vezzoli. You can congratulate the young doctor. Please go ahead.